Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of these uncomputable problems. The first one was lexical ambiguity or ambiguity resolution in language. So one thing, you may not realize it, but language is filled with ambiguity. It's kind of a miracle, I think, that we actually communicate relatively effectively. But so it's often the case that, a sentence has multiple meanings. So we may not entertain most of those interpretations, right? We may discount them or ignore them immediately, but they are nevertheless present. So, like, for example, if somebody tells you that their dad is bugging them, you could think that the dad's sprinkling bugs on them, which is a weird thing, but it could happen, or that he's spying on them, right? Though the most likely interpretation is that he's simply annoying her, right? You would just use context, right? The other things are unlikely, so you would just assume that it's probably the dad's annoying her. And so, again, we're going to talk about ambiguity and resolution in natural language processing. All right, so imagine if the sentence is the spy saw the man with the binoculars, right? Like, so for the first one, right, my dad is bugging me. I think that that's kind of trivial. Most people would probably realize what the correct response is based on context. However, there are other contexts or situations or sentences where uh, it's not clear. So the spy saw the man with the binoculars, right? So is the spy using binoculars to look at the man, or is the spy looking at the man who is wearing the binoculars? In other words, are the binoculars being used by the spy, or are they associated with the object of the sentence, which is the man? And so in this situation, it's not clear which interpretation is correct. Though I would suspect that many of you would interpret the sentence as saying that the spy has the binoculars, right? And there's two reasons for this. Um, One of them is you're using semantics, right? You're using the fact that you're using semantics to resolve the ambiguity, and binoculars are tools of spies, so therefore it's likely that the spy has the binoculars, right? However, uh, now I'm going to use a caveat. I don't really know much about syntax, so but I think that this is correct. And if it's not correct, you can do it with another sentence. Okay, so just know that. The other reason for why or how we might uh, interpret this sentence as the spy having the binoculars is because there's a bias to select the interpretation that is syntactically less complex, right? So you would likely pick this one, right? The one on the right. Sorry, I should have put these pictures up before. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but I'm almost positive that the spy with the binoculars, is the more syntactically or less syntactically complex sentence, which we'll talk about. Though I'm not positive. Again, it doesn't matter even if it's not, because this happens with other sentences as well. Um, but this is what we call minimal attachment. It's a preference for interpretations with simpler syntactic structures. And again, this is based on my limited knowledge of syntax, but I believe if you look at, if you were, this is what's called um, sorry, I should back up. This is called minimal attachment, and it involves attaching new information in a sentence, and you're attaching that new information onto a sentence structure using the fewest grammatical or syntactic resources. So we'll talk about this more in later lectures, but you can make what's called a syntax tree, which is what these things are. And you can do this for any sentence. So in a syntax tree, you start with the sentence, which is S at the top. And then within this sentence, you may have a noun phrase, which is NP, or verb phrase, which is VP, as well as determiners such as the, nouns, which is symbolized by N, verbs, which is symbolized by V, prepositional phrases, right? PP. and then prepositions, which are P. Okay. And there's other ones too. This is just an example. And if you count the number of blue uh, blue things, right? So one sentence, S is one, noun phrase is two, three, four, five, six, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? So this is has 15 what we call nodes, or like grammatical objects, I guess. You count here, there's actually 14. So one, two, three, four, five, oops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So there's 14 nodes or grammatical objects. So we would say that this sentence is less syntactically complex than this sentence. Okay. And so this shows that we can use both syntax and semantics to resolve ambiguity. And those are just a few things. We can use a lot of potential sources of information, but I would say maybe those are the big ones, or, of the big ones. So, yeah. And so you would be based on syntax and semantics, you would probably pick the right interpretation as the most plausible interpretation. Okay, so now we'll talk about another example. So this is when the sentence structure is ambiguous, and we're going to talk about another example. This is where we're using semantics and syntax, sort of certain biases for minimal attachment, and also the semantics of it. But there's other things that we'll use, other sources of information that we'll use. So, for example, if imagine if I showed you this picture, we got a candle, feather, and then we have, I guess, a cheetah with a candle, and then a frog with a feather. And so the command is, choose the frog with the feather, right? So, imagine if you saw this. Does this mean that you should select the frog that is holding a feather, or select the feather and then use the feather to select the frog? Uh, and my guess is, if I had to guess, is that many of you try to do this on your own and make a decision, right? So that way you commit to something. And my guess is that many of you would have selected the frog, right? Just gone straight to the frog, and you probably were confused by the with the feather bit because there's only one frog, right? However, what if the instruction was to tickle the frog? Right now, I bet most of you would pick the feather and tickle the frog, even though I may want you to tickle the frog that is holding a feather. That's still a possibility. Um, and the uncertainty is about whether the prepositional phrase, sorry, whether the prepositional phrase should be interpreted as use the feather as an instrument, or as a phrase that modifies the frog, right? So if there were two frogs and one didn't have the feather, and I said, do something to the frog with the feather, you would probably just go straight to the frog with the feather, because the with the feather part phrase is kind of like modifying the frog. It's telling you which frog to use. But in this case, there's only one frog, so you're not sure which one, right? Or so you don't need to use that. It's less likely to be used as a modifier, right? But the verb choose has developed a bias, right? Due to how it tends to be used in everyday language, right? There's a distribution. If you were to look at how often choose was used, the verb choose was used in language, you would find that it's more likely that it's more likely to be used in a certain way. And the way it's likely to be used is it encourages people to interpret the prepositional phrase with the feather as a modifier of the frog. So you'd be more likely to pick the frog with the feather. If I said choose the frog with the feather, right? And that's because the word choose is more likely to be used in that way, right? As a modifier, in a modifier context. In contrast, the verb tickle is a little bit more intuitive. The verb tickle has developed a bias that encourages people to interpret that prepositional phrase of with the feather as an instrument that should be used. So the question is, so the choose verb is has a bias, a modifier bias, and the verb tickle has an instrument bias, right? Just because of the statistics, the distribution of how those verbs are used. And of course, using how the language is used based on frequency statistics is also a way that humans learn natural language grammar. And so this lexical information shaped by statistical patterns of the language helps resolve linguistic ambiguity. I'm going to put this as an aside because it's you may not care, but I actually went on ChatGPT once and asked them. This was after I asked for examples of verb biases of actual verbs, right? And this is the picture. I asked the ChatGPT to make a painting of me based on the interactions that it had had with me so far, and this is the picture it gave of me. Um, Presumably because I was asking a lot of questions about verb bias. Uh, it's funny though, that's all it says. Cognitive science and then verb bias is written a ton of times. There's some code here because I ask it questions about code. I asked it why it only talks about verb bias, and I don't know why. It didn't really give me a good answer, but I said, we talk about a lot of things, and it seemed to be sensitive to that, and it made another picture here, and now you can see that it incorporates Mars levels of analysis, and it tries to get serial order problem and Lashley. You can see some of that. The interesting thing is that there's no students in the first picture, and it sort of I didn't even tell it that, but it sort of I think it program must have maybe implicitly realized that I was also insecure or something about the fact that there were no students in the class. Anyways, that's all. In the next video, we'll talk about referent indeterminacy in learning new words.